I would say lesson one, create momentum. I was a person who showed up every day determined to just pick the ball up and move it down the field. I'm going to walk in off the street, which I did with my flip-flops on, and did this speed round interview. And it's how I got my job at Pizza Hut. You're going to have setbacks and you're going to have tough days. But the thing that I tell myself at the end of every workday before I walk in my house is, I did the best I could today. I'll try again tomorrow.
Welcome to CEOs and ABCs, real stories from execs who lead at work and show up at home. Career moves, parenting wins, and fails, and everything in between. I'm your host, Kevin Rice. Here's today's episode. Today's guest is a powerhouse marketer and creative leader who's helped shape some of the world's most recognizable brands. From Pizza Hut to Hilton to Carter's and now Papa John's, Jenna is no stranger to guiding legacy brands through transformation. She's led emotionally resonant and culturally relevant campaigns like Hello Optimism, Made for This, and Today is Someday, and built flagship brand experiences across digital and retail. What's her secret? A unique ability to blend data with deep human storytelling. Currently, Jenna serves as the Chief Marketing Officer at Papa John's, where she's on the executive leadership team, driving strategic evolution and brand innovation at scale. But what makes Jenna even more remarkable is how she shows up outside of the office. She's a proud mom and wife and a passionate advocate for working parents. She's spoken about the importance of paid parental leave and continues to push for more supportive corporate cultures. In today's conversations, we go a little deeper into Jenna's creative process, the inspiration behind some of her most effective campaigns, and how motherhood has shaped her approach to leadership and balance. Today's guest is Jenna Bromberg. Jenna, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
I know, Jenna, I've followed your career. I actually knew who you were even in your early days at Pizza Hut. There were so many Pizza Hut people that during that period are now executives, C-suite, CMOs across the industry. So it's been really amazing to see the careers that have come out of Yum Brands as an organization.
Yeah, we had a good time. And it's a fabulous organization. And particularly for a marketer, at the time that I was there, it was such an interesting time. The landscape was evolving. Social was becoming a thing. Food innovation was really picking up pace. So it was an amazing time to be at that organization.
You've helped evolve brands like Hilton, Pizza Hut, Carter's, and now Papa John's. If you were to close your eyes and think back across that journey, what's a moment that changed you? A conversation, a failure, a win, just something that made you rethink who you are or how you lead.
So I will talk about a win or a moment, and I will talk about a huge mistake that I made. So
Perfect.
We can all learn from it. A couple things happened when I was pretty junior in my career. One, I had a series of mentors who bet on me, whether it was my very first boss in Kansas City, who had coffee with me and hired me in as a copywriter when I had no copywriting experience, or it was my boss at Carter's, Jeff Jenkins, who bet on me at every turn. I was fortunate enough to have leaders and mentors who took a risk on me and looked at my potential and not necessarily my track record. But, the moment that really changed the game for me was a 140-second interview. And it's actually how I landed at Yum Brands. So in 2013, I was at South by Southwest, and that was the digital marketing conference of the time, right? And every social media manager or digital marketer would go down to Austin for a few days of amazing panels and parties. And we networked, until dawn, really.
I was there that year.
You were there that year. Well, something very big happened. That year, Pizza Hut was doing this sort of PR stunt to hire their first ever social media manager. And it was interviews that were 140 seconds long. Okay, so the idea was...
I do 140 characters.
Yes. If you could pitch yourself in 140 seconds, you can pitch the brand in a tweet, which at the time, for those who don't remember, was the 140 characters was the character limit of a tweet at the time. And I remember seeing a Forbes article about that program and saying, I'm going to do that. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to walk in off the street, which I did with my like flip flops on, which is a little bit mortifying now, and did this speed round interview. And it's how I got my job at Pizza Hut. So my boyfriend and I at the time relocated from Kansas City to Dallas. And that's how I really started my marketing career.
Amazing. It's amazing that you put yourself out there like that. I think I would have probably been intimidated to do something like that at that stage of my life and career.
Yeah, and that risk was a risk that worked out. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made that really changed me was really later in my career, and I was at the director level at the time. I loved my job. I loved it, Kevin. I was like head of communications, so I was doing all the TV advertising and the packaging, and that's all I was doing. It was all like the fun, glamorous go to LA for a week on all these TV shoots. I was doing all that cool stuff and I loved it. And one day we had an org change and I was rescoped to be a director of brand marketing. And let me tell you, I freaked out. I lost my mind. I was so upset. I would tell everyone who would listen, this is not the job that I want. This is not where I want my career to go. And let me tell you something. It was the best thing that could have happened. I learned, classical brand marketing. I learned product innovation. It was a career changing role for me. And I did not trust that my mentors and my leaders had the best interests of the organization in mind and the best interests of my development in mind. And if I could rewind, I would just tell myself, take it in, juice the experience for every single learning and lesson that you can get out of it, and continue forward with a smile on your face.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like I have, and probably many people do, like just fall into that victim mentality of like, this isn't
Yes.
fair. This isn't right. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about just personal challenges or career challenges. And thankfully today I have this amazing partner and she's constantly reminding me to think about, what is the universe trying to teach me through this? Like if I'm going through challenges, there's a reason. There's something that I'm supposed to learn from and grow through this. And sometimes it's really hard in the moment, depending on what's happening, to find something to cling to believe in, to say, okay, this is happening to me. And in 5 years, I'm going to look back and I'm going to see why. And maybe I don't see it today, but I can trust that this is, serving me in some way. And it sounds like that change certainly, served you in your career.
Absolutely. And what it also taught me is as I went on in my career, organizations change, businesses change, teams and leaders change all the time. And how you react to that change is so, so important. And a lot of times it determines your trajectory. I had a mentor who used to say, your attitude determines your altitude. And I have found that so, so true.
That's a great quote.
Yeah.
You've come full circle back to the pizza world where your career began,
Yep.
but your experience in the restaurant industry started a long time before that, right? Your father was in the restaurant business.
Yep.
How
He
did that
was.
influence your career and direction? And, did you learn anything from him that like you brought into your work?
Absolutely. So, my dad went to hospitality school and I followed in his footsteps, went to college for hotel and restaurant administration as well. But I knew I never necessarily wanted to work in operations. I thought I wanted to become a writer. And as I went through high school and as I went through college, I found a way to merge what I loved about the restaurant industry, which was the pace, the innovation, the creativity, and the sort of attitude of service and hospitality with writing. And I was so lucky that social media was becoming a thing at the time that I was coming out of college. And so I was able to do content creation and journalism around the hotel industry, which was so fun. As it relates to my dad, he was an entrepreneur. He started his own restaurant chain in Canada, which is where I spent my childhood. And it was really fun to see the creativity and excitement of casual dining at that time. In the 90s, like casual dining was really fun. There were all these cool concepts, and people were really building. And it was fun to watch him because he was so dedicated and so devoted to his business. And over time, as he's, continued working, it's actually been really fun to run into him at industry conferences and have some of
Nice.
my colleagues come back and say, "Hey, I met your dad." So it's been really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's fun. It's a family affair.
Hmm. For sure.
So so now that you've come full circle and
Yep.
you're back in the pizza world,
Yep.
you know, when you walked into Papa John's, say, like on your first day, like what was going through your mind? Was there any sort of like uh, you know, memories from your Pizza Hut days that came back, or what were you feeling getting back into the restaurant industry given what you just shared about, your history and your
You know, there is no category like pizza. There is nothing else like it. You have kind of the fun and excitement of QSR. You have the competition and sort of real time e-com of retail. And you take those two things together, and it is so much fun. So within truly 2 hours of walking in this building on my first day at Papa John's, I was like, oh yeah, I'm back. It felt so familiar to me. It truly felt like coming home. And just hearing some of the, vernacular and the lingo and talking about stage gate processes again, it just felt like coming home to me. And things have changed since I've been in the pizza industry the first time around, right? Aggregators weren't a huge part of our business back in the day. The digital mix has just transformed for every single pizza player. But boy, is it fun and so familiar. And a brand like Papa John's that has so much equity in better ingredients, better pizza, it's really fun to play off of that legacy and take this brand into its next chapter.
I spent probably like 10 years supporting restaurant industry brands, and I totally agree. It's such an amazing industry. The people in the industry have just been so wonderful to work with. I've got, friendships and relationships that started many years ago and I still stay in touch with today. It's just like a wonderful industry to be in.
Yeah, it's the best. And the pace is like none other. It takes a special type of person to hang in this industry. Yeah.
Super Bowls are an intense day.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
speaking of leading a global brand in this industry and the constant pressure and motion, like how do you balance everything, your personal life, your family life, your career? Has there been any sort of times where you had to make a hard choice between work and family?
Yeah. I have always been committed to being there for the important things for my family, whether there's, something going on personally at home, making sure I'm committed to showing up for them. That's the most important thing, right? I had a boss once who reminded me all the time that if I was gone, the company would replace me tomorrow, but my family would miss me forever. And I try and keep that close to my heart. And I try and make sure that they are priority one always. Now, there's always seasons, right? There's going to be seasons where your career is in the driver's seat and your family's in the passenger seat. There are going to be times where you make decisions to move your family across the country and it's super disruptive to them, but it's a new adventure and it's driven by your career. But then there are also these times where I've been able to downshift, right? There have been slower moments. There have been roles that I've been in that moved at a little bit of a slower pace. And so I could really engage with and spend more time in my personal life. I am at my best, both with my family and at work, when my plate is full and I have all these different challenges in front of me. I have the most energy, I have the most motivation when I am fully flooded with challenge.
How like if you go back to when you first became a mom and you've been a very vocal champion for working parents, but when you first became a mom, you're kind of in the thick of it, new baby, demanding career. What did you need the most? And was there someone who helped support you through that period? Was there a moment where you needed to ask for help?
Yeah. For a lot of people who move around for their jobs, oftentimes you're not close to family. And in my case, I actually had somebody at work with me who became kind of my guardian angel during this really tough transition period. So there was a woman who was senior to me who I had just connected with over several years in that role. And we just got along beautifully. And I always sort of bring an open heart to work. These are people who you're going to spend so many of your waking hours with. I do not subscribe to the keep personal and work separate mentality. I try and form these real genuine relationships with people that, will carry on long after you leave a job or a role. And in this case, I had my son. It was 2016 and I thought I had it made. And then he was born. And I was like, oh my God, I do not know what to do. I just had found in my career that I could really study and apply myself and predict what was coming around the corner. And that's what made me successful. But as you know, with a baby, that's not what happens. And I found myself just really in over my head on my maternity leave. And here comes this woman who had had a baby about a year before and had walked this path before me. And she brought me lunch several times a week and sat on my floor with me while I was at home on maternity leave. She would sit on the phone with me at night while I asked her questions and wondered out loud about all of the things that I thought I was doing wrong. And on the day I came back from my maternity leave, I dropped my son off at the daycare and she was waiting outside the door for me to come out. And she took me up to my office and sat with me while I cried because it was my first time away from my baby. And I will remember the way she supported me for the next few months forever because she gave so much of herself to me to help me through that time period. I will never, ever forget it.
That's beautiful. I mean, how do you repay somebody who's done so much for you? Because I I can't imagine how important and meaningful that relationship has been for you.
Well, I promised her that I would pay it forward.
And that's what we do, right? Like,
That's what we do.
that's what this life is about. That's
Yep.
beautiful, and I think whoever you pay it forward to is a very fortunate person because I think you'll be able to bring a lot to their life and supporting them. You mentioned moving a few times, and I know you've moved your family. You've moved from Texas to Virginia to Atlanta. What did that look like in real life? Not the press release version, but like the family conversations and packing boxes and doubts. I mean, I read your press releases when you started at new positions, and that's exciting and amazing. But like, were you worried? Were you excited? Was there a lot of discussion into making those decisions within your family?
Yeah, great question. It's interesting. When my husband and I decided we were going to get married, we had a real deal conversation about our vision for our lives. And we had this really clear conversation about my career versus his career and whose would take priority. And were we open to relocating if, the opportunity called for it? And we came to this incredible agreement that one, my career would take priority. Two, that he would be supportive of the right opportunities and come with me when needed. And three, that we would check in and adjust along the way, which we have. And we've had several moves for my job, and they've been amazing adventures, right? And he's somebody who grew up one single place and didn't move around a lot. And so he was excited for the new adventures. It changed a little bit, right? Once we had our son. And we had a little bit more flexibility before he sort of got into kindergarten and grade school when he was still little. We all had these adventures together. And now I'd say we're a little bit more settled. It is scary, but it's so exciting. And I'll also tell you, it's so rewarding to have that flexibility to be able to move around and go to new cities, try different lifestyles, try different companies. And, I'd say taking those risks always worked out.
Yeah, and it gave you an opportunity to for your family to experience new things, for you to experience new things in your career. I imagine moving to Carter's, being a mother probably was something, a role in a brand and a company that really connected with you. And I noticed that through a lot of the campaigns that you led that were very public and visible. It always seemed like there was a lot of heart behind the strategy. So could you maybe share or tell us a story behind one of those campaigns that brings up all the feels for you? What was going on in your life? What made those campaigns personal for you?
So, probably the one that I am most proud of is the work that our team did on a campaign called Hello Optimism. And at the time, it was, late 2020. The world had been upended by a global pandemic. Kids were not in school. And, it felt to a lot of parents like absolute chaos. And there was so much difficulty in the world at that time that I know, if you remember that time, a lot of the advertisements, all started with in these uncertain times.
Like
But
we
as
needed that
parents,
reinforcement.
like we needed that, we know. And we didn't want to make an in these uncertain times type of campaign, but we also wanted to show parents that we see them. Um, and to also be this kind of beacon of hope in this really dark time. And one of the things that was remarkable to us as we were developing the idea for this campaign was all this stuff is happening, but babies are still being born. Lives are still being changed. There's new life being created and coming into this crazy world every day. And that's beautiful. And there were millions of babies born that year, and Hello Optimism was all about this tension between the darkness in the world and the hope of a newborn. And so, in that campaign, it starts in a hospital and it's moving down the hospital corridor, and it looks like a COVID ward at first.
Hmm.
And then you start to see these sweet little rainbows on the wall and these nice little drawings. And then you realize you're in the maternity wing of a hospital or labor and delivery. And then you go into a room and you see this beautiful newborn baby in somebody's arms. And then it starts talking about all the babies that were born in 2020. And we flash up these real photos of babies who had been born that year. And it was just work that I was so proud of because it resonated with not just parents, but so many people around the world who were kind of reaching for that hope. Carter's was such a fun brand to work on because the emotion of infancy and new parenthood is the most moving experience that many people ever go through. So it was really fun to be able to play with that.
Yeah, no, I remember the campaign. It was very touching and connected with me on a more like deeper emotional level. 2020 was kind of like a dark night of the soul for me type of year. My second son was born 4 months before kind of the world shut down. And my company, being that we supported large restaurant chains, I didn't know if every restaurant was going to shut down and we were going to
Yeah.
have to close down our business. I'm a father, young kids. I didn't know what was going to happen with the world, my business. It was a really tough year, but having brands that showed up with supportive messages and optimism, that was the message we needed to hear. So thank you for that.
Totally.
It was a beautiful, beautiful campaign. And I probably knew it one because all my kids wore Carters for at least the first 4 years of their life. I found onesies that I liked, and then it'd be like, all right, 3 to 6, six
Yep.
to 12. Well, every single time I buy the same exact one, which is why I never understood why there wasn't like a subscription for that for people like me who just wanted the same exact onesie or jumper every different stage as my kid was growing up.
Well, maybe they're watching this right now
Yeah, yeah,
and
I'm
you
here
just gave
for
them a
it.
great idea.
I'm here
Awesome.
for it. Put me on subscription and I won't have to think about it because there was
Love
always
it.
my favorites and I didn't want them to grow out of them.
Yeah.
So I would happily just keep putting them in the same jumper every, 6 months.
Totally. Totally. I did the same thing.
I've heard you say, and actually, I think I read an article where you mentioned there's a lot of overlap in parenting and leadership. So, is there any sort of times where, as a parent, maybe your son said something to you or you had an experience that made you rethink how you were leading at work?
Yeah. There's a lot, but I used to coach my son's soccer team up until last year. Okay. So these are kindergartners, first graders, little guys. And Kevin, they were the worst soccer team ever. They were they were just not getting it. And maybe they had a bad coach, I will say. But, there was one season where they lost every single game. The whole season they scored one goal, okay?
Mm.
However, they were having the best time. And the thing that sticks out to me from that experience is every time the opposing team would score a goal on us, I would see these little heads just whip around and look at me, right? And they were watching to see how I reacted.
Mhm.
And I was so careful to keep a smile on my face and cheer for the other team and keep my energy up.
Mm.
And they reflected that right back at me, right?
Mhm.
And it's the old advice when your kid trips and falls and scrapes his knee, you don't go because then they get scared and
Yeah.
start crying. And I have absolutely found, when times are tough at work, everybody's head is whipping around and watching how you react. And it, I have seen time and time again, if you continue to keep positive energy, continue to not react to setbacks, and keep people focused on the goal and keep them moving forward, you will build a winning team.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in times of difficulties. I recall back in my career, Hathaway, we had one layoff. And for a small company, we were probably maybe 50 or 60 employees. And I think we had to lay off like at least just over 20 employees. So it was a huge percentage of our staff. And that period taught me a lot about carrying yourself, but not pretending like nothing's wrong. Being
Yes.
clear with what's going on, how it made me feel. Like, I wasn't shy about the fact that this was painful for me. I felt like I was losing, people that were a part of my, at least like my family. And so I was very open and honest about what I was experiencing. But at the same time, I knew that it was an opportunity for us to reset. And we actually did. We completely changed our business, we changed our strategy. That was when we went from being kind of a general digital agency into a restaurant specific consultancy. We built IP, we built channel partnerships. We completely changed the business model in the subsequent 12 months. And, it completely changed the trajectory of our company. Within just a few years, we had 250 employees. And so we're a totally different company. And it really was that like how we carried ourselves through that moment of adversity, which was one of the worst times of my career. But out of it, like, we reflected on earlier, I look back and it was something that I had to go through. We had to go through as a company to get to where we ultimately ended up being.
Yep. Amazing.
So, Jenna, you've had just an amazing career, and a lot of our audience are people who are maybe more in the earlier days of their career, aspiring to become executives, and are earlier in their family journey. What advice would you give to our listeners who look up to you and want to have a similar career?
Yeah, I would say my first piece of advice is find ways to create momentum. Be somebody who creates momentum in your company or even in your life. I look at my time as a more kind of junior level team member. And the thing that I did differently was I found the opportunities and I reached for them and I got things moving. I didn't wait to be asked. I moved. And, the second piece of advice I would give you is someone is always going to be betting on you. Don't let them down and don't take that for granted. So Find your mentors, your champions, your confidants who are going to help you move forward, and be really choosy about who those people are. Be careful about what advice you follow. Don't scroll TikTok and take the career advice on TikTok. A lot of it is very bad. And then, the other thing is design the role that you want. My mentor, Jeff Jenkins, who was the CMO of Carter's, he always used to tell me there's no traffic if you make your own lane.
Mm.
And when I think about the ways I was able to advance my career, almost every single role I ever had was a role that didn't exist before me. So I either found something and built it in a role that I was in, and then sort of took that on as part of my scope and grew that way, or I was performing at a different level and then got promoted into the level I was performing into. But making sure that you're setting yourself apart as one of one. You are not competing against your peers. Their success is not your failure, ever. You are always running your own race. And to successfully run that race, you've really got to figure out how you can create the path that sets you apart and works for you.
Amazing. And for those same listeners who are thinking about, following that advice and trying to figure out how do I do it all? How do I really lead and I take initiative in my career while, staying present for my family and balancing all the other aspects of my life? You shared some great rituals earlier about having consistent family nights, having quiet time and reading time to connect. Any advice for people who are just trying to figure out how to have harmony in their life and their career?
Yeah, it's hard and you're never going to be perfect. But I would say, there's a few things. One is just communication and setting expectations, right? Like there are a tremendous amount of jobs to do at home, whether you are single or married with kids. There's just like stuff to do. You've got bills to pay and things to do. And, particularly for those who are in a long term partnership, communication is the most important part of that equation. So for me at home, I've got zones that I own. Like my zone is the kitchen. So grocery shopping and cooking dinner and planning meals, that is my domain. We don't ever have to talk about it. I just know that's my job. My husband's domain is the laundry and the doctor's appointments and the school things. And we don't ever have to talk about it because we just have established those zones. But there are going to be seasons where your career is crazy. And sometimes bills won't get paid because you're going to forget, or you're going to show up at work with a shirt that is not steamed appropriately. And that's just going to happen. But for you to successfully balance the work and the home of it all, you've got to be able to give yourself grace and not beat yourself up when you show up in a wrinkled shirt or you forgot to pay a bill. That stuff is going to happen, and it happens to the best of us.
I, there's no playbook, there's no magic bullet, but I think you hit the nail on the head with saying like the one thing that's closest to a magic bullet when it comes to how to balance life and career is giving yourself grace, because we can really beat ourselves up. I've experienced a lot of
Totally.
parental guilt, fear, like just FOMO, missing out, all the things. And at the end of the day, like we're all trying our best. And that's kind of why I wanted to start this podcast in the first place, was for us to just have more candid conversations about how tough it is. Like you mentioned earlier, I've read all the parenting books. I did courses. I worked with parenting coaches. Like I did all the things and I never really felt like they connected with me because they were really written for people that didn't have the same kind of, high stress career, demanding work hours, travel schedules. They were suggesting things that just weren't practical or realistic. So I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing your experiences and some of those moments that, I really connected with. Do you have any final parting thoughts for our listeners? Just anything you wanted to share before we wrap up?
Have a vision for your career and what you want it to look like. Be willing to check and adjust as you go, because the path that you thought you would take to make that vision become a reality is almost certainly not what the real path is going to look like. But, you're going to have setbacks and you're going to have tough days. But the thing that I tell myself at the end of every workday before I walk in my house is, I did the best I could today. I'll try again tomorrow.
Beautiful. And that's probably like the best life advice, not just
Yep.
relegated to work, but everything you just said is totally applicable to life, work, family, personal interests. Again, giving yourself grace, doing your best. And tomorrow's another day.
Yep. For sure.
Jenna, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your stories. Like I mentioned earlier, I followed your career. I think the work you've done has been fantastic, but it's been fun to get to know you on a little bit more of a personal level. So, like, thank you. I truly appreciate your support.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. This is an amazing opportunity to get to know you. And I love all of the folks that you've had on so far. So, looking forward to being a longtime listener.
Thanks, Jenna.
Awesome.
If you're enjoying this conversation, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. CEOs and ABCs is all about helping you grow in your career and show up at home. We've got many more amazing guests coming up, so tap follow and stay tuned.